Thank you very much for joining us here today. And in this panel session, we're going to be discussing the future of the business analyst, the evolution of the role. Now, you don't need me to tell you that change of all kinds is accelerating across all kinds of industries, and technology is a key catalyst for that. And with business analysts, the trusted advisor in many organisations, what can you do to best support those organisations in the midst of all of this change? And on top of that, when the role itself is likely to change in the face of many new technologies, that are going to support decisions that organisations are making. We're going to touch on artificial intelligence perhaps during the course of this. What should we be doing as a profession to future-proof ourselves as well as supporting our organisations? So, evolution of business analysts. We have an expert panel here who've charged up their crystal balls and are going to help us peer into the future over the next 20-25 minutes or so. So, on the panel today, we have Ken Fulmer, Liz Winiarski, Sharon Rowland, and John Pritchard. Please show your appreciation to our panellists. That's a good, healthy round of applause. You've set the bar high, ladies and gentlemen. Super. So let's learn a bit about our panellists, but it's not going to be a simple what's your name and where do you come from. I want to find out about how you came to the role of a business analyst, or indeed supporting business analysts as well, as we'll hear in a moment, and what challenges you've faced in order to get there. So Sharon, why don't we start with you?
Hi, I'm Sharon Rowland. I'm a lead business analyst at Zurich. I line manage 6 BAs. I also work on a large programme of work where I'm responsible for the delivery of the BAs as well. My journey to being a BA was an interesting one. My first job was a final salary pensions administrator. If anyone can remember what final salary pensions are these days. It was the days when we were first creating money purchase policies, the very first ones. That's a long time ago. I then moved on to be an underwriter, which later in life was a really good skill to have, on corporate risk policies. And after 5 years, I moved companies and very quickly got asked to go onto a project. They were creating a new application for a new product. So I went on the project as an SME, which was really good, really interesting. I loved it. And then I never really left the project. I became in charge of small change, which in some ways was quite a good thing to learn, because I went through project managing a small change, the business analysis part, probably the systems development, the testing, the full life cycle. But it took me a very long time to convince management that I was capable of more and really wanted a new challenge. It took me 7 years. But eventually I got there and transferred the knowledge and moved into a systems development role, and very quickly was able to demonstrate the value that I could add to key projects. And I was really lucky. Because of that, I managed to be able to get onto some really challenging and interesting projects along the way. And I've evolved into that lead business analyst I am today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Sharon. John, you're next down the line. You are head of apprenticeships at the BCS. How did you get there?
Strangely, I did 23 years in the military, left the military, set up a training organisation, moved to do some advice for Sector Skills Council on right apprenticeships, and then have been implementing new standards, but came over to head of BCS to head up all of the new standards which we're currently implementing, and the ISBA being one that we've launched this week. So my challenge over the BA was getting the likes of yourselves together in a room, and having the conversation, what is a business analyst? What are the key core skills you need in a standard that fit across not just one company, but small and large, IT and non-IT? And that challenge is still ongoing, but there is a standard that we've come that we think will evolve, but as key generic skills to go forward for some longevity. But unfortunately, technology changes and that will change, so our challenge will continually be to make sure we have those skills for the right people.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Liz Winiarski, Lead Business Analyst at Nationwide.
Yeah, Liz Winiarski, Lead Business Analyst in Nationwide, the largest building society in the world. I've been in the post now for 2.5 years, but where did my analysis role start? Probably when I was 8. Yes, it's as far back as that. I was absolutely intrigued with leprosy. We had a missionary friend in Africa who sent photos of lepers, and I wanted to find out everything about leprosy. So I analysed it, and I knew far more than an 8-year-old should do about leprosy. But I ended up doing a degree in microbiology as a result of my interest in bacteria. I worked in the NHS for 4 years, managed to get my face on the first page of Telegraph because I discovered Cryptosporidia in Swindon's water. So again, that's... and I didn't even realise I was on there as I was travelling on the train. I suddenly saw my photo and thought, oh, that's me. But then I decided to take a career break, and I brought up my 4 sons. And during that time, my analysis didn't stop because I became a day trader. So I then started analysing markets. I also looked into building my own house, so I could tell you everything about it. I took up IT courses as well because I'm embarrassed to say I was totally IT illiterate. Didn't know anything. Couldn't even work out what a floppy disk was. It was that bad. But I did take on a lot of courses and applied for a developer job in a very small company. Now, my husband told me, you're not going to get that, but I was determined to show him I was wrong. I got the job, and then moved my role from a developer role, moved very quickly into an IT business analyst role. I then moved to a large utilities company, RWE, based in Germany, and worked there for 8 years as an analyst. Again, it was more around process optimization rather than requirements gathering, although there was some of that. And then I moved on to the finance sector, and I am now in Nationwide. That's me in a nutshell.
Gosh, quite a journey to get to where you've got to today. I guess some of those, and you alluded to it there, some of those core skills going all the way back have really helped you in your role that you have now.
In fact, I did ask my 4 sons, if I were to ask you, describe me in 1 word. That was in preparation for this.
That's a dangerous question to ask.
These were the answers. Caring, perfectionist, you don't give up, and then my final son, I won't use his exact words, but he said, you like wine.
And that's always a really interesting exercise. You know, people who you know in your family, but also people who you work with in your workplace, get them to describe you in your job role in 1 word and just see what the delta is between what you're expecting and what they describe you as. Super stuff. Thank you very much indeed for that, Liz. And finally, Ken over there, IIBA. Tell me more about you and about IIBA.
So my career started early on, right out of college into the military and then on to graduate school. I went to a U.S. oil company, Sunoco, which at the time was ranked about number 40 in the Fortune 500 list. And so a large, mostly North American company that had a number of refineries, so manufacturing, 6,000 retail locations that were mostly convenience store, gas station combinations, and a whole supply and distribution channel for gas and crude oil and pipelines, basically. So that's the company, and I spent 30 years there, became the chief technology officer the last 12, became a CIO at another oil company in the central United States for a few years after that, and then got involved with IIBA, first through the local chapter in Philadelphia where I come from, and became the chapter president. I was the chapter president there for 6 years, got involved in the international board for a few years, and from the international board moved into the CEO role at IIBA where I am now.
Okay. Well, we'll delve more into that in a few moments' time. But what we're going to look at next, so we've heard a bit about the past. What's giving you a headache at the moment in your respective roles? Let's chat with you, Sharon, first of all. What's keeping you awake at night right now when it comes to being a BA over in Zurich?
I'm hoping that a couple of other people in the room will probably appreciate where I'm coming from. We've got companies that are driving the digital change very rapidly. That seems to be the CEO's mission, to drive that forward. It's all about what it's going to look like for the front-end customer, broker, their journey, etc. But sometimes those strategic things they're pushing digitally has a conflict with the operational processes behind the layer. And I think sometimes it's been down to the BAs working on some of those key projects to ensure that the operational process is still fit for purpose behind the technology. So in some case, it might be a manual process. So operationally, they're still being asked to be cost-effective, to streamline, but at the same time, because of the digital strategy we've got, it's actually making it a lot harder for the operational teams. And I think that's quite hard in the space for BAs to work in at the moment.
So at times, a lack of joined-up thinking is contributing to your headache. How about you, Liz? What's giving you a headache apart from microphones at the moment?
I wouldn't necessarily call it a headache, but I have got a particular issue, and that's what is traditional business analysis, and is that the future for business analysis? So when I say traditional, I'm talking about requirements management. I've worked in a few organisations, and when you ask what does a business analyst do, I get told they bridge the gap between the business and IT, and they manage requirements. They elicit the requirements, they document them, and that's it. I think there's a lot more to business analysis than that. And if any of you have attended the BCS courses, you'll see that it's far, far broader than that. And I personally believe that many organisations, especially larger organisations, there's a gap between the strategy and the business. And because business analysts tend to work in the change community, the executives go to third parties, to consultants, to come and sort out strategic problems, enterprise problems. And I personally believe that the business analyst is able to do that, and somehow we need to raise our profile so we are called upon, as opposed to third parties. Not that there's anything wrong with third parties, but they don't have the knowledge of the business that we have. They don't necessarily share the same culture. So I would like to see in the next year, maybe next 5 years, to see the role of the business analyst escalated back to where it really should be.
I would say I'd agree with Liz, because I think if we had that in place, we wouldn't end up with the gap in the strategy and the focus being completely just on the solution, but the focus being on the whole encompassing strategy and solution across the whole business.
One or two nods of recognition from those attending today as well. But how do you see us being able to, or you, sorry, being able to do that, to make the business recognise the role that really the internal BA team should be able to fill, but it's currently an untapped resource?
Potentially the business analyst practice, the senior management may be approaching the executives, or, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, the actual location of the business analyst practice. Currently, they tend to be located in the transformation change community. Maybe they should be sitting somewhere at the top, where you've got business analysts that sit at the executive meetings, that hear what's going on. You know, they're right in the depths of what's going on, high up. So putting the business analyst practice in a different location in the business potentially could be one option. Interesting.
Ken, in terms of the challenges that you see around about now and in the short term, business transformation, for example.
Yes. So those are some of the things that get us thinking about what has been said here about what's the relevance of the profession, and how do we, as Michael Noonan stated this morning, how do we transcend the traditional boundaries? Because they tend to be a limiting factor, and how do we break out and get the right skills in place to be responsive into those transformations that are happening across the board. So a lot of the ones that we focus on now, with the breaches in security have nearly crippled many companies. Sony was one recently. North America, Equifax, where hundreds of millions of records were stolen. So that brings in the cybersecurity. The other I see from talking to a lot of companies around the world is a lot of struggle around how to integrate Agile in with the traditional practice and how to use BAs within that practice context. So plug for IIBA would just release the new Agile extension to our BA BOC, which kind of gives a hint at it's still about analysis that has to be done even in an Agile framework.
And you touched on data protection there, data breaches. Let's talk about GDPR very briefly. Is that featuring on your current challenge list?
Definitely.
Okay.
Now, that's something that does keep everybody awake at this, I think.
Yep.
It's huge, as somebody described, huge, big and hairy, or hairy and scary. And that really sums it up. It's very big, and a lot of people do look at GDPR in a negative way, especially if you're in a large business, you've got lots of legacy systems. But personally, I think there are huge opportunities there. From a personal perspective, I'm happy because I own my data and I don't want anybody doing anything they want with my data. So from a personal perspective, we should all be happy. From a business perspective, it forces business to actually start looking at their processes, to become more process-centric, which is only a good thing. You become more efficient, you link your processes to your strategic objectives. It's a good thing.
And a real good thing, an opportunity for the business, the BA profession as well, surely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And lots of business analysts have been very busy with GDPR.
I think there's quite a lot around GDPR. Working in the GI space, it's trying to understand the value of that change, because nobody has any idea of how many requests we're going to be asked for people to remove their data. And having worked in different parts of the insurance industry, it's about, okay, it's my own data that I'm asking to be removed, but does a company have an obligation to actually say, do you know what, if you remove your data, you are not going to be able to access that later down the line. We all know about the asbestos claims. That took decades to come out. So I don't know whether we have obligations to actually say, do you know what, once it's gone, it's gone. There's no recall on it. And, and it questions whether we should be saying to people, it's not a good idea to delete your data in these circumstances, even though they are owners of it.
GDPR is a discussion all in its own right, but it's certainly a point that needs a lot of discussion, and like we say, challenges and opportunities. There's a lot of analysis that needs to take place around GDPR. So good luck with that, everyone. But John, in terms of skills. Obviously, we do need to make sure that the people who are coming into the profession have the correct skills. Is that a headache that you're able to address, that you're seeing challenges with right now?
I think we're seeing challenges. I'll put it into two different camps, because there's the new era of the digital trained people coming out of schools and colleges that are seen as a benefit in the business in some cases. And then there's the current people that are being upskilled in the business into new technologies, and technology changes daily. I'm out there trying to learn things every day, let alone pass that information on, write that into a standard for all of you dealing with that every day. And those skills, there is a general underpinning knowledge of skills that people need. They can't be specialists in everything. It's physically impossible. And the BA role is about knowing the right people to bring in and who those people are have got the skills and the technology and the language they need to speak to. We struggle, and we had a conversation earlier about sometimes you bring contractors in. They don't know your legacy systems. They don't know what infrastructure is in place. But the person that does is your analyst internally, and they should be relied on more for those skills they need to speak to. You bring a project manager in, and they can go, well, this is what we're going to drive to. And they've already got a predetermined answer. You haven't been through the process or looked at the systems and the technology in place. And that all needs to be focused more of how that's integrated internally. But I do think you've got new talent you can bring into the business now. With these people that are brought up with digital, they touch type when they're born now. But those skills are really needed in the sector as well.
My kids don't touch type, they just talk to the technology instead. They find it much faster. Thank you very much.
That's the next iteration
That
of
is
AI.
the next iteration.
Can I pick up on something John said? Because
Please do.
It's quite key that we look at I think as an industry, we always look at BAs in the IT industry and we try and recruit people with the same similar background, like computer science degrees, maths degrees. I think sometimes in the world we are now digitally, we need to start looking at those with creative skills, those with excellent communication skills to manage all those stakeholders. And I think it's quite key that we broaden our outlook onto the type of skills that we want in the organisation to add value.
Well, let's build on that as we look towards the future and what skills will be needed in the next, say, 5 to 10 years, as far as we are confident glancing ahead. Liz, where do you see the kind of skills that are going to be required for business analysts in that time period?
I've read a very good description, which I can read to everybody. I think it sums it up very nicely. So these are business analysts of the not too distant future, must and will become visionaries, innovators, strategists and transformational leaders, executing strategy through project results. Successful business analyst teams will learn how to embrace organisational values, empower their teams to thrive, bring customers into the change process and drive innovation through collaboration, creativity, design principles and global partnerships. And to me, that sums it up. So it's all about leadership. It's about being fantastic collaborators, facilitating discussions between different parts of the business. To me, that statement states it all.
Visionaries as well.
Visionaries, I love that. I love that.
Goodness me. Okay. How does that resonate with, because this is in essence what you were just talking about some of the other skills that need to be brought into the industry as well.
I totally agree with Liz, and I think there are probably many people in this room that can understand those skills and probably already using those skills that they have. But I think Agile's here to stay. It might not be in the purest format in every organisation, but there will be sort of different makes of Agile out there, and I think as a BA we have to learn to adapt. We're probably in the best position to be able to do that. Our core skills enable us to be able to adapt and add value throughout that journey, and I think it's just bearing that in mind, that we have those core skills and we can transfer those quite simply and easily into that Agile world.
Let's talk about another angle on skills, for example. And in my experience, I've worked with two different types of BAs. Those for whom not having technical skills within the domain that we were working in was, they said, their largest asset. The fact that I do not know the technology that I'm working with enables me to focus on the requirements, enables me to focus on making sure everything's hooking together to meet the business requirements. On the other hand, I've worked with ex-developers who are BAs who can code their way out of a paper bag and can assimilate huge volumes of data in order to support business decision making, and the technical angle that they have certainly adds to their role. How do you see, from a skills perspective, the future of the business analyst?
So we're looking at a number of things of how to move it forward. So we've created a thought leader program to try and identify some of those specific skills, and working with universities and global leaders to try and drive that out. And some of them I'd bundle under digital business analysis, which is kind of
DBA, kind of.
Yeah. We're trying to avoid the DBA title for obvious reasons. So that's, I think that's part of what it's about, is trying to get down to what are those digital skills necessary to handle the transformations that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
I think the other is just some more near-term skills, that some of which Liz alluded to, and what's an enterprise strategic business analyst and what are the skills necessary to operate at that level. So our thought leadership programs are driving that out, and how to drive change and look at that. On the question you asked about the technical aspect of it, I think that's the main thing that a business analyst does is not to be the hands-on practitioner of technology, but to be able to interpret what is enabled with technology, what is possible, and to be able to understand technology at that level so that it can be interpreted to the business to enable some of those transformational activities. Like, you couldn't create an Uber without understanding a lot of that disruptive network process that's part of Uber.
Sure, a lot of disruption there at the moment. But thank you very much, Ken. John, your take on the future as well when it comes to skills?
I think the future on skills, as we've said, there's underpinning skills. I think you need to be involved in. I agree with Ken that the technology conversations. But I think in certain organisations there will be specific skills you need. And we've talked about, GDPR, but data protection, cyber is key in a lot of sectors. And it may be that some of these people have got to specialise in certain avenues of technology for that business to function and to maintain that internally without bringing external skills in and losing the productivity of the organisation. But I think there is certainly core skills that will go across all of the roles and the understanding of where technology is going.
Thank you very much indeed. Listen, I'm afraid
Can I just say something?
You have to be very, very 140,
just very
280
quickly.
characters or less.
Yeah, I think we will see in the future different flavours of business analysts. A little bit like architects, you get program, enterprise solution, technical architect. Maybe that's the way business analysis is moving as well, where we'll see these different flavours of analysts.
Sure, lots of points to pick up on. If you want to carry on the conversation, then in the break, which is in about half an hour time, please do grab these people. But for now, please show your appreciation to Ken, Liz, John and Sharon.
Good job. And of course to David.
David, yeah.